Was this the worst performance of the season by Dak Prescott? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to be breaking down our all 22 notes, including Dak Prescott's performance against Buffalo. We'll talk about Mazi Smith's first start. I want to talk about TJ Bass and how he performed when Zack Martin came into this game. But really quickly, off the top, Landon, I was feeling not great yesterday about the Cowboys' loss. And then, as always, the Eagles make things just a little bit better. They lose to the Seahawks. It had to make you feel like 5% better, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, certainly it's, especially since most of the heat yesterday coming from Twitter was in Kelly Green. And they, and so for them to kind of have their day of glory just absolutely rained on by, YOLO interception, by having Jalen Hurts out Drew Lock, I think was a great way to kind of buoy the feelings for sure.
And I know there's a lot of people asking about how does this loss impact the Cowboys. I'll just go through it really, really quickly. Yeah. If the Cowboys and Eagles both win out, it's very likely that the Eagles will win the NFC East. I can't say it for sure because the fifth tiebreaker, which we would get to, is strength of victory. And the Cowboys would actually need, they would need Buffalo to lose like the next 3 games. They would need Carolina to win like 2 of the next 3. You're starting to see why.
The Chargers have got to win some games against Kansas City. Yeah.
So now if the Cowboys do win the NFC East, here's how it happens. The Eagles lose a game and the Cowboys win out. Cowboys are in. Cowboys lose to either Detroit or Miami and Philly loses. The Cowboys get in. There are some scenarios now where the Eagles don't have to just lose to the Giants. They could lose to the Cardinals and then the Cowboys win out, or if they lose to Miami, they are in as well. So that loss last night for Philly did give the Cowboys a couple extra different ways that they can now get into they can win the division. Just wanted to point that out.
Both teams could lose this next week, and the Cowboys would still hold an advantage over the Eagles at that point. So, it's. I mean, again, I think we looked back. I mean, I was just thinking about it. We looked back a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the scenarios and how unlikely things seemed, and now things seem more likely. It's just don't ever feel like you can predict what's going to happen in the NFL week to week. It's crazy. So anything can happen.
I'll give you an example of how much things have changed. According to our friends at FanDuel, even after the loss on Sunday, the Cowboys' odds to win the NFC East went from plus 380 to plus 225. You just don't see that with a win. That's how big the loss was for the Eagles. But let's get into some of the all 22 notes. I want to start with Dak Prescott. Yeah. You and I both watched the film last night. I got to say, I think there was a lot of different factors in this one, but I kind of think this was Dak's worst game of the year.
Yeah, let's caveat some stuff, right? The weather was as bad as we expected. Now, going back and watching all 22, especially on some very key throws, if you go and pause it on the end zone tape, you see those flags at the top of the poles of the goalposts just whipping around in every different direction, many times going directly in the face of where Dak is throwing the football. I specifically look at that long completion that he had to 88 that I think was the longest completion of the game for the Cowboys on that kind of over route to Lamb on the sideline. Lamb got absolutely crushed on that throw because he had to just sit there and wait for the ball to get there. And Dak gave it everything he could into the wind and it just took a couple miles an hour off the ball.
Well,
And that was a completion, So
and this is what I was trying to tell people last week. Everybody's looking at they're going to their AccuWeather app and they're looking to see what the weather is in Buffalo. First of all, the weather in Buffalo in Orchard Park are very different. I know that's technically the same place, but you get in that stadium and the wind just whips around because it's down in a bowl. You have to walk down into the stadium. And that's what you saw on tape. Yeah, the weather wasn't bad of like huge wind gusts all game long, but you did see it impact not only Dak, but also Josh Allen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a reason that you had the number 2 and number 3 probably best passing attacks in all of football, and almost neither team threw for more than 300 yards total. So between the two of them. So I think that is definitely a factor. But beyond that, Dak struggled to see things that were open at times. There were definitely moments where you felt like I'm thinking off the top of my head, there was a couple of different times when you saw there were too many different points at the tape last night where I saw CeeDee Lamb frustrated, surrounded by green and no defenders, and Dak didn't see him. There was one that was in the middle of the field. There was one that was during the 2-minute drive at the end of the half where Dak was trying to force it. I think I can't remember if it was Ferguson or somebody else on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, there was absolutely no one there except for CeeDee Lamb standing next to the sideline 5 yards up the field. They could have whipped it around, given to CeeDee Lamb. He could have gotten an easy 15 or 20 yards and then stepped out of bounds without ever being touched. That's how wide open he was. There was another play where they're trying to get it, I think, again to Ferguson on the right side. And on the field side, on the larger open space, the Cowboys had a 2-on-1 zone with Pollard in the flat and CeeDee Lamb upfield and one defender on that side between the two of them. It could have been a huge play. So absolutely there were factors. The wind was a problem. The pressure was getting to him to a certain degree. But I also think that that's a little bit on Dak, because we've seen Dak have similar types of pressure that we've seen in Buffalo, and he didn't let his eyes drop. He didn't let his, didn't stop looking down the field. And on top of that, you add in like just a sync problem. There were just times when Dak was hitting his back foot and the receiver didn't seem to be where he is supposed to be in his route at that point, where he's still making his break or he's already made his break, and so the timing of it is all off. It's hard to know whether that's route timing or if that's Dak's footwork that's the problem. But the whole passing game just seemed very disjointed. Yep. And then you add in the weather, you add in the fact that the Cowboys defense couldn't stop anyone, so they had to throw the football. And it just made for a terrible situation for the Cowboys, especially as the score got worse and the weather got worse as the game went on. But again, let's not excuse what Dak did when the weather was fine and the game was a more neutral game script. This could have been avoided if the Cowboys had been able to find some passing efficiency early in the game. But the fact of the matter is that if they weren't going to be able to find it early in the game when the weather was a better situation, the score was in a better situation, they certainly weren't going to be able to find it late in the game when the weather got worse, the wind was worse, it was wetter, and they were being forced into passing situations because of the scoreboard.
Yeah, the way to beat Buffalo is to run the ball, which they tried to do in the first half. We don't need to get into some of that stuff, but
they did well running the football. That's what I think is a little bit frustrating to me, is that what stopped them from running the football was the scoreboard, not the defense. To be
correct.
Honest.
Yes, they were. First drive of the game, Pollard ran extremely well. But the way to beat them in the passing game is to either get rid of the ball really quickly, like 3-step drop throw, let your guys make plays after the catch. Because you saw the tape, Lane, and they had like 2 safeties deep. Like sometimes 25 to 30 yards, get rid of the ball quickly, let those guys make plays after the catch. What you can't do is take a 5 or 7-step drop, try to go through a bunch of reads, and then dump off the ball to a running back or a tight end, because by that time, the defense is just closing in on everything. There was times where I saw CeeDee Lamb open, on a sit route. And I know it's harder to throw the sit routes when it's windy, but wide open for 7 yards on first down. Just take it and move on to the next play. You're not going to create a bunch of big chunk plays in the passing game against Buffalo. You've got to be really consistent and you've got to be patient. And Dak just wasn't that on Sunday.
Or too patient at times, right?
Or too patient,
late over the middle to his dump offs, like you're saying.
Yes.
just don't even throw that ball.
Don't throw it.
Like if it's that late in the snap and the linebacker is literally waiting for you to throw the ball to the running back, it's not like a lot of positive yardage is happening. Just
Pollard got
squirt up to
killed
the
on
front
one of them.
and slide.
Yeah,
what'd you say?
Pollard got absolutely crushed because of that exact same scenario where Dak was too late throwing the check down and the linebackers just popped them and it was almost interception. So yeah, just a rough game from Dak. The good news is historically, and at least this season, whenever Dak has had a poor performance, he usually backs it up with a really strong performance the following week. We will see if the Cowboys can do that against the Dolphins in week 16. Lena, let's move on to some of our other notes, including Mazi Smith's first start of his career against the Bills. We will break that down next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all of your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front so you know that you're getting a great deal without any hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We wanted to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Lena, let's talk about Mazi Smith because there was a lot of discussion over the last couple of days about Mazi Smith's performance in this one. How much did the Cowboys miss Jonathan Hankins? What did you see when you put on the tape?
I think the Cowboys probably could have used Jonathan Hankins. I mean, that certainly
without a doubt
would have been helpful. But I also don't know that the defensive tackles were necessarily what was getting you killed in this game, and especially Mazi Smith. I think Mazi played for the most part one of his better games of the season. I think that there were definitely some up and down moments in the run game. I think that's fair to say about every defender on this team, to say the least, including some of your very best defenders.
Yeah, we'll get to him in a second. Yeah,
having some really bad, run reps. But I thought for the most part, you saw at least 2 or 3 different run plays where Mazi had a positive effect on the play. He had a quarterback sack, another pressure. And I look, were there times that he got pushed out of the hole? There were definitely times he got pushed out of the hole, but I felt like for the most part, he had a more positive game than he did have a negative game. And I wouldn't call this a breakout game, but I would continue to say that it was a step in the right direction and that he's, again, progressing. And look, this was a positive sign for Mazi coming into this game. Not like Marquise Bell in his first start at linebacker kind of breakout positive, but still a positive showing for a guy that is piecemealing his way into more and more snaps.
Yeah, we heard Dan Quinn yesterday say that he thought Mazi did a good job of staying square and playing strong. He talked about he still needs to work on the double teams, and you saw that. There was a couple times in this game where when they doubled him, they moved him off the ball. Now that's something he's got to work on. But and there were some snaps. You and I were talking pre-show. Down at the goal line, he beats Osiris Torrance and he causes Josh Allen to dive. At the 3-yard line. Good stop by him. There was another play where he beat Mitch Morse right off the snap, forced James Cook to go to the outside. He did his job there. Obviously, he got the sack. He got another pressure. I would say it was a good game, not a great game.
Yeah.
Nobody on this defense really played great outside of, I thought DeMarcus Lawrence played a good game, but he did about as well as you could have expected is the way that I kind of boil this down to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think even in the pantheon of other defensive tackles, he was probably the best defensive tackle
Yeah.
outside of
Yeah.
Osa. So,
But that doesn't mean
and
that we don't want more and that the Cowboys don't want more. They drafted him in the
oh yeah,
first round to be a big impact run defender, and we're still only seeing it a couple times at game at the most. You want to see the consistency, but at least we're seeing the flashes now.
yeah. I mean, he's making his way. At least it doesn't. There's nothing there. Like
Yes.
it is continuing to be positive. It's just you would like for the pace to pick up just because you have needs,
Yes.
at that position at the end of the season. So, but I wouldn't say that he's, he's on schedule, I would say, in his development at this point.
Let's talk about Micah Parsons briefly.
Yeah.
He had an unbelievable game rushing the passer. He only had 18 pass rush snaps, and I think he had 7 pressures. Didn't record a sack, but as a run defender, I'm not sure I've seen him play a worse game as a team run defender.
I think the problem too is that teams have figured out that he's just not going to get holding calls, and so they are attacking him. I think that there's 2 things here. One, they know that he's not going to get holding calls. I think the Bills also did a very good job with some of their holding, including using their inside hands to keep him from running outside, as opposed to trying to grip him with their outside hand, which I thought was interesting technique. But I mean, beyond the holding stuff, like, you have to kind of play run defense as a team, right? And if you have defenders on different depth levels, that's creating a hole. Like, you don't necessarily have to have the hole in the gap, right? It doesn't have to be between the defensive tackle and the defensive end. If the defensive end is far as 2 or 3 yards upfield, the defensive tackle is on the line of scrimmage. There's a hole coming out the side that the running back can go through and then upfield and create big things. And that was happening a lot, as they were letting guys or in some cases they're punching Micah in the face and then pushing him in the back, and then he's up too far upfield to contain the run. I mean, it was whatever the result or how they got there, whether it was the defensive end just getting too far upfield because they were coming in on pass rush, whether they're being blocked upfield. But that was one of the ways that you saw the Bills taking advantage of the aggressiveness of the defensive ends by getting them too far upfield, running power to that direction, so that you had a pulling lineman on Damone Clark or Bell coming outside of the hole, and then suddenly you've got Cook who could be really patient, wait for the blocks to development, and then as soon as everything lines up, boom, he's gone. He's like slaloming between defenders, and he's gone for 10 yards. They had, like, I'm not joking, they had 8 10+ yard runs in this game. That's ridiculous, and that's not just because of being out of your hole. That's because of bad run play, run defending, being out of your gap, but also just terrible tackling. I mean, guys just don't go untouched for 10 yards. Like, guys are getting their hands on him and not bringing him down. So, that, to me, that was the stat of the game, in my opinion. 8 10-yard runs. I mean, there's a reason that the Cowboys couldn't get anything going offensively when they had, this kind of pressure coming from their defense, where the defense could not stop anything. And it was chunked runs. Like, that's just so, I mean, we talked about it a lot last year about the McCool Mosier line, right? Or however the Mosier McCool line.
Big Mosier line. Yeah.
McMosier line, right? So I think that there's an application here too, when your opponent's run game can gash you, they can create big plays in the run game. Like, you're going to cross that line very quickly, because it takes away. First of all, it's draining the clock. It takes away possessions because they're getting first downs when they're doing that. And then on top of that, it has a cumulative effect that the passing game success doesn't have, right? You're physically beating up the defense. So it means that they're more and more likely to have those big runs as the game goes on.
Just really quickly on Micah before we move on, there was at least 3 times when I charted where he's the edge setter. Oh, he's supposed to be the edge setter. And mostly it was against Deion Dawkins, and the running back's getting close to Micah. And instead of just holding that offensive tackle a little bit longer so somebody else can come in and make the play, he jumped inside And all James Cook did is bounce it to the outside, and there's nobody there to fill in where Micah Parsons is supposed to be. And that resulted in huge gains. I know Micah was frustrated because he wasn't getting calls. He wasn't getting an opportunity to rush the passer. But this is where, as a team, they just have to be a more disciplined run defense. It's not going to be just one player all of a sudden saying, hey, I'm going to be the reason we're stopping the run today. Stopping the run is a team thing.
Let me give one more thing too that I felt like. I mean, I already mentioned missed tackles as an issue. This team really missed Malik Hooker in this game.
Yes,
and I think we talk about it a lot with some missed people, like, oh, this team missed this guy. I feel like Malik Hooker hasn't gotten enough flowers for what he's done in the regular season. Like, so far this year, he's been incredible. And it's been hard to notice because, safety is a position that if you don't get interceptions, it's just not a lot of recognition, because it's hard to kind of notice strong safety play outside of that. I think what we saw was that Wanye Thomas is not ready to take Malik Hooker's spot, right? He had a lot of missed tackles. I think Curse also had a lot of missed tackles and with really bad tackle depth. Malik Hooker is a very strong stabilizing force in this run defense who can also make plays in the back end, and having him back there is an incredible luxury that the Cowboys should not, take for granted moving forward, because I think, the success of this Buffalo Bills run game, there's a difference between getting 4 and 5 yards a carry as opposed to getting 7 and 8 yards a carry. Sure. I think Malik Hooker could have been the difference in that if he had been in the game for at least, a dozen of those runs.
100% agree. Let's talk about some other players that stood out in either a positive or a negative way next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have this many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is quick and easy. They've even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making that process even easier and even quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know on tomorrow's show, we're going to be answering your Twitter questions. Make sure that you send them in to us at Marcus_Mosier, at McCoolBCB. But Lena, let's talk about a couple other players from this game. I wanted to mention TJ Bass. He came in after, I think it was like 18 snaps that Zack Martin played. Did not allow a pressure, did not allow a sack. Wasn't amazing, but I thought he did good enough, as good as you could expect for a off-the-bench right guard.
I mean, think about what we've heard, outside of the Cowboys sphere in the national media. There's the whole conversation being made about the lack of quality offensive linemen in the NFL, right? And that the NFL is having a hard time filling their teams with a good starting five, and then if you're lucky to get a good starting five, anything beyond that, any kind of backup situation. What TJ Bass has been able to do when he's been able to come in these games throughout the season as an undrafted free agent rookie has been really impressive. I mean, is it impressive in comparison to what Zack Martin does?
No, of course not.
Absolutely not. No. But let's set our expectations right. I would say even for a backup guard coming into this game, a game against two strong playoff contenders, good teams, he was able to not only hold up his end, especially in the passing game, but was a positive force in the run game. You saw him getting to the second level and getting onto the linebackers, securing his blocks at the line of scrimmage. I think that TJ Bass is a more than functional, a plus player, NFL player as a run blocker right now. I think what you worry about coming into the game is as a pass protector. And he did what he needed to do, and sometimes against Ed Oliver, who played a very good game in this game. So yeah, kudos to TJ Bass. I mean, a kind of rare bright spot again. A lot like Mazi, right? Where is it notable in the larger scale of everything? No, he's probably pretty average, but average is great for a rookie who's making his, playing a lot more than he's used to, and for both of these two players. So yeah, I think TJ Bass again kind of shows you he's a reliable backup out there. He's a guy you can trust to come in at on a moment's notice and be ready and give you positive snaps and not only be not a detriment to your run game, but actually be a positive. Not Zack Martin again, not Zack Martin,
of course,
but still a guy that you can run behind, and they did run behind for some successful plays in several different cases.
I think he is competent enough that you have the conversation this week about resting Zack Martin for a week and not rushing him back from a squad injury, so that he can be 100%. Either by the Lions game or certainly by the playoffs. Like I think that's what we're talking about here. Do you feel comfortable enough to have him play against the Dolphins? And as long as you have the other 4 starters, I would say the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, I hate suggesting anything other than Zack Martin playing.
I know, but man, I've had those deep thigh bruises before playing basketball. And they're not fun, and they don't get better in 6 days. It's going to take 3 or 4 weeks before Zack Martin has that explosiveness back in his quad. So I wouldn't be opposed to them resting Zack this week. He's been dealing with an ankle anyways.
Yeah, that's true. It probably would be good overall. As a fellow old man of Zack Martin and as someone who's still dealing with a calf injury that I suffered while leaning over my bed because I'm an old man. I empathize. Yeah. So I do think it, it's something to consider. The question is, the risk versus reward there. Right. But I do think that TJ Bass's play is what can, make you have this conversation is what gives you the confidence to even suggest, hey, can we handle going this week without Zack Martin? I think, his play was a bright spot.
Yeah, I bet you they rest Zack Martin if I had to bet.
I got one more guy that we got to mention before we leave that I would just be absolutely remiss if I didn't mention.
Hunter Lipke?
My guy Hunter Lipke, of course. He gets a couple of really killer lead blocks and then converts a big third down on a run, or fourth down on a run play. One of his first few carries of the season. It's time to get Lipke some more carries. It's time to give Lipke some more touches. It's time to get him some more snaps as far as I'm concerned.
He is kind of a freight train on those short yardage stuff. I mean, he just puts his head down and man, he can be a bowling ball. So listen, I'm glad that you gave him that shout out. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him play some more snaps and maybe you get him on the field a little bit more this week. If you need some help in pass pro, we'll see. We'll see what the Cowboys decide to do there. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out our show on YouTube, Locked On Cowboys over there. Go check out Locked On Eagles. If you're having a bad week, go listen to Locked On Eagles this week. I promise it'll make you feel a little bit better. Our guys Gino and Lou had quite the episode this morning that I watched.
They're podding through it, guys. They're podding through it as best as they can.
They are. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.